Wake that ass up.
In the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ Envy, Angela Yee, Charlamagne the Guy. We are the Breakfast Club. We got some special guests joining us this morning.
That's right. Two people who are never not doing the work. They're always on the front line.
Founders of Black Voters Matter, LaTosha Brown and Cliff Albright. Good morning.
Good morning. I don't think people realize how much Black Voters Matter does. Like, y'all are always on the front lines. Like, even now when people talk about, oh, well, you know, last summer it was all of these protests and stuff, like, y'all have not stopped.
No, we're in these streets.
That's right.
We're in these streets because our people need it. At the end of the day, for our work, it's not really centered around elections. Our work is how we're going to build independent Black political power. And we know that elections are part of the process, but part for us is how do we build an ecosystem of our people really deciding what it is that we want. And so that's why we can't stop. That's why we say we do work 365 days out of the year. And our frame is can't stop, won't stop. We ain't going nowhere till our people are free. We ain't going nowhere.
That's right. Well, how did you guys start Black Voters Matter?
Well, you know, it depends on what you mean by the start, because we've been doing this work for over 20, almost 30 years, and most of that doing it together. We met in Selma, Alabama. LaTosha grew up there. I moved there with my wife, April. So we've been doing this electoral organizing, and more importantly, racial justice organizing. Like LaTosha said, don't get it twisted. We're not just an elections organization. We're about building power. So we've been doing this work for almost 3 decades, but then a couple of years ago, about 4 years ago, we decided, you know what, what would we do if we had $1 million that we could just start giving out to groups, just like groups that we work with every day, and give them the resources that they need to be able to impact elections and to approach elections a different kind of way, where it's not just about the ritual of taking part, right, or the ritual of filling out the voter registration form, but doing that kind of deep organizing and connecting movement with electoral power, right? And so that's what we did. We started off, in the first big election we did was in Alabama in 2017. Y'all might remember that Doug Jones, Roy Moore election, and Black folks came out then and shocked the world. And after that, we took it on the road in 2018, spread out to 7 states. Driving around in some rental cars that LaTosha always teases me about. Says I used to always
had the cheap cars.
See that? Don't listen to that. Don't listen to that.
We had the little cheap cars for $30 that when the wind blows, the car going off the road. I was like, can't we just get an SUV or something?
Right. But we went around to places, states, and rural counties that a lot of people don't know, can't even find on a map. Because that's how much we believe in building power. And one of our mottos is Black Voters Matter everywhere. So that's what we did.
Now with COVID, as we all saw, a lot of people were able to vote by mail and do things that were unheard of before the pandemic. So what do you think is going to happen moving forward? Because we've been seeing all these voter suppression laws that have been getting passed in certain states. So what can we do to make sure that we're still able to access being able to vote easier?
You know what? We got to fight. At the end of the day, we have to really recognize what this is about. Part of what the work that we're doing, we're telling people we're honest about voting. Listen, our name is Black Voters Matter, but we're the first to tell you we don't believe that voting is going to lead to Black liberation by itself. That's not what we believe. But what we do believe that it is a tool, and that when people are in struggle and they're seeking to get power, you have to use everything available. We ain't leaving nothing on the table. And so at the end of the day, part of us, even the work that we're doing around, you know, even around voter suppression, is not just around that. It's really around getting people to say, go get your power. At the end of the day, we have to assert and stand in our agency. And so part of what we're doing is this is an organizing opportunity for us to literally get Black people to think about, we have to think about our power, we have to think about our agency, we have to think about governance. If we're going to build something different, we got to think about governance, because what I can tell you is when people are not thinking about that, you'll create the same thing that was already created. So we have to use this as an opportunity. And so the work that we're doing around voter suppression is twofold. One, it is, yes, we got to stop the bleeding now. We're actually out in these streets. That's why we are fighting for this federal legislation, so that what we're seeing, this voter suppression that is happening when people are hearing about the John Lewis For the People Act and the John Lewis Voter Advancement Act, we need that to actually stop the pain that's happening now. But beyond that, we also need, you know, I always ask people this question, what would this nation look like without racism? Just sit in that for a minute, right? And the reason why it's important to ask this question, because if we ain't asking that question, what we doing? Because we'll never create that if we can't even envision that. There's nothing that has been brought into the physical world that folks didn't first envision. And so I'm saying that because part of the work that we're doing is not just responding to what is now, it is helping people to radically reimagine every single system in this country. If that means shifting the whole way we see the criminal justice system, because we know what it's rooted in, that means shifting education, if that means shifting the voting process. But part of being able to do that is people have to really understand what that process is, why it does not meet the needs we have, and what it is that we want to replace it with.
And if I could add on, I agree with everything LaTosha said, but in regards to that fight against the voter suppression piece, we got to be willing to use the power that we have, right, and to use different tactics. Like, we got to believe what Malcolm said when he says by any means necessary. So one of the things we did in Georgia was we started this whole corporate accountability campaign, where we said, look, corporations, we had research that said, oh, Delta is giving X amount to the very people that are pushing these bills, right? Coca-Cola is giving thousands of dollars to the very people that are pushing these bills. So we said we got to call them out,
right,
and we got to hold them accountable, right? We got to tell them, you can't have it. You can't be asking us to be your employees and be your consumers and living off of us and dependent on us while you're funding our suppression, right? And so we did a whole corporate accountability campaign to fight back against that Georgia bill, to fight back against the Florida bill, to fight back against the Texas bill. In Texas, it worked, right? All of it worked because at the end of the day, that's what movement is, right? We started in Georgia, couldn't stop the bill in Georgia, but it created momentum that then let us stop the bill in Texas.
What do you say to people who say that, voting doesn't matter, or people who say, I don't like any of the candidates, so I'm not voting?
At the end,
we say you're right.
I mean, the truth of the matter is, you have to understand, this ain't a popularity contest. We ain't talking about no talent show.
That's right.
We're talking about, at the end of the day, if anybody has done any social justice work, I can tell you the difference when I go into a courtroom, that if a DA matters, absolutely. If one DA is in office opposed to another DA, that can make a difference between whether our people get time in jail or 20 years to life. Having a judge in place that is least more accountable to community makes a difference for us. So we have to really see this as a harm reduction strategy. At the end of the day, I don't know about anybody else, but anybody that's making a decision about me and my family, I need to be a part of that process. So this isn't about who you like or who you don't like. It's really around, how am I going to reduce the harm happening to my community at the very least, and how am I hold folks accountable? If you come at us, we coming for you. Right? There has to be consequences when people are doing things that are harmful in our communities. So when those DAs or those judges use an opportunity to exploit us, we got to go and make sure we move them out to give a consequence. And the same thing is also, we have to put people in position. Cori Bush being in position, this sister being in position, being voted by young folk, right, young black voters. As a result, the entire process around housing eviction, her actions matter. So for us to not acknowledge, right, you don't have an analysis of power if you say it doesn't matter. It's the same thing around, how many of us you don't like your boss, you ain't gonna go get your check? Right? At the end of the day, it's really around how you're going to use the tools to actually advance your community. And voting is one of those. Every single aspect of our lives is impacted by voting. Find me something that isn't. Right? You can't even die and your people get the insurance money without having a death certificate. Somebody creates that policy. So as long as we're in this formation, right, where this public policy impacts every aspect of our lives, if you are a person like me that believes in self-determination, I've got to be a part of the process, right? Because I'm not going to let you make a decision about me and mine, and I'm not a part of that process.
Now, you recently met with Kamala Harris. How was that meeting?
It was actually a really good meeting.
Actually, you weren't expecting?
No, you know what?
I know,
no, because she's a good sister. I will say this, that I have been to several. You go to the White House meetings and, they can be photo ops, right? Or they're scripted pieces of what you got to say or what can't say. That wasn't that meeting. That meeting, I felt like it was a genuine, we were given the space and a lot of time to be able to share what we thought, and to hear more about what she was doing that we didn't know. And so in that space and in that spirit, it actually felt like a really good meeting. I think we learned and there was an exchange, and some of the suggestions we made, I think she's taken that on as well. And so in that space, that's part of the reason, because I have been to the White House meetings where they were like, here your photo, bye y'all. Peace out.
It seems to me, and I love the word that y'all are using, accountability, because it seems to me like we're not holding Democrats accountable enough, because there seems to be no sense of urgency in the Democratic Party in regards to voting rights. Like, they're clearly trying to take away black people's, rights to vote. And when you hear the Joe Manchins of the world say things like they're not even willing to do carve-outs.
That's right.
Carve-outs and carve-outs to preserve our voting rights. How did that make y'all feel?
it makes us upset, right? That's why we've been in these streets. That's why we've been leading protests at the Senate office buildings, right? To call them out, to say that they got to end the filibuster, right? That's why we led a march just last week, 2 weeks ago and last week, at the White House, telling President Biden, you got to pick a side. You can't give a speech where you all passionate, talking about, oh, this is the biggest attack against voting rights since the Civil War, and then in almost the very next sentence you say, ooh, but I like me that filibuster.
Word up.
You can't do that. Like you can't play both sides. You got to pick a side. And so we're serious when we say we got to hold them accountable, and we got to recognize the differences between president, Senate, Congress, even the state levels, right? Because you can make the argument. You look at the Texas Democrats. Like, they're taking it seriously. Right. They left their state. They left their families. They left their jobs to come to D.C. to fight this fight, right? And so you got different pieces of who the Democrats are, but the ones that we need right now are not stepping up. The Senate has not stepped up enough. The president clearly has not stepped up enough. We even have to put pressure on the House right now, because here's the deal. The House ain't the problem, right? They passed the For the People. They're about to pass, starting on Monday, they're about to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Heck, for the past month, four members of the Congressional Black Caucus been in the streets with us and got arrested, right? LaTosha was out there with Chairwoman Beatty from the Congressional Black Caucus. Hank Johnson from Georgia got arrested with me a couple of weeks ago, right? Your brother Wes Bellamy was out there with us, right? And so they Tamika and them out there at the airport. Linda, right? Shout out to Until Freedom. And so folks been doing work, and some of them Democrats have been out there with us. But we still need the House to do more, because right now they've got leverage. There's an infrastructure bill, right, that the Senate was all excited about because they just passed it. Biden all excited about it, right? But guess what? It got to go back to the House. And the House can say, look, until you act on H.R. 1, it's called H.R. 1 because it was their first priority. They said it's the most important bill to us, the For the People Act. That's why they call it H.R. 1. So the House can say, look, until you act on our priority, we not acting on that infrastructure bill that you just passed. They got the power to do that, but we could have to push them to use that leverage. So again, the House ain't the problem, but even they have to be pushed into being accountable. We gotta do what we gotta do, and right now that means we gotta be doing more direct actions. We gotta be in these streets. We gotta be willing to do some civil disobedience. It's gonna take that level. It shouldn't take this much to get something that we were supposed to have with the 15th Amendment in 1870. It shouldn't be this hard. But if this is what it's going to take, then we got to step up and rise to this moment.
Yeah, we know the House isn't necessarily the problem, but Joe Manchin is a Democrat. Kristen Sinema is a Democrat. You know, Maggie Hansen is a Democrat.
He's also a white Southerner.
That's right.
Let's call it what it is.
That's right.
Racism is a nonpartisan issue.
That's right.
And so the bottom line is, in this country, we have not fundamentally dealt with structural racism. So is racism the Republican Party? Is racism the Democratic Party? Our people have consistently, every time we've ever moved forward, is because we demanded it to be so. Right? We've had to fight the Democrats as much as we've had to fight the Republicans. Right. But we can't say they're the same. To actually say that they're the same is to lack having an analysis.
Joe Manchin at least, though.
No, I'm not, let me say, I don't even know if Joe Manchin is a Democrat. But
exactly.
That's a whole nother story. But at the end of the day, we have to be sophisticated enough to really know the distinction. And when we don't, because part of, even for black folks, I mean, the bottom line is, I know everybody was all up in arms and like, oh my God, we don't understand what Trump. If you come from the Deep South, we deal with Trumps every single day. Every day. But we're able to know the distinction between a Trump and a Biden. But we're also able to see how they're the same and similar. And I'm raising that because I think there takes a certain kind of sophistication to really recognize if it's a harm reduction strategy, whether I'd rather you to have if I know that a stone and a Uzi are two different things, right? And so I've got to literally be able, sometimes within this context, I've got to be able to make the choice that creates the space for me and my people to move around the easiest. And so in many ways, I'm raising that because it's not even for us, part of the reason why we created an organization, because we thought that there need to be there need to be an organization that was not beholden to any political party, that we can call all of them out, as we're doing now. Because ultimately for us, is how are our people going to advance? We're not going to get stuck in your agenda because you this party or that party. We are able to recognize that what we got to do when we got to do in an election, but fundamentally who we are accountable to is black people.
So what do you think about Joe Biden's presidency so far?
I mean, I think, we're not going to say that he ain't done nothing, right? COVID, right? The first relief bill, this child tax credit, some of the stuff on infrastructure. There's stuff happening, right? So we ain't gonna say that he ain't done nothing. But on the defining issue, right? On the issue that is literally threatening this democracy, threatening our communities. I always say voter suppression is a violent crime. This ain't no white collar crime, right? Because when you have voter suppression, it leads to policies that have violent impact on our lives, right? Ask the folks in Florida and Texas whether voter suppression is just some innocent crime. And so there's some stuff that he's done, but he's got to do more, and especially on the issues that are the issues that our folks want to see. Black folks want to see action on voting rights. Black folks want to see action on police violence. We still waiting on George Floyd Act. We still got the Breathe Act, right? That still got to be dealt with. That goes even farther than the George Floyd Act. We want to see we want to see some student debt canceled, right? I'll tell you that personally, right? And so there's some issues that we need them to do. We want to see HR 40 dealt with.
We want to see reparations.
Right? We want to see some reparations. So there's some stuff happening. But on the defining issue of voting rights and then on other issues that are impacting our communities, he's not moving fast enough. We need him to keep up that same energy he had for infrastructure. We need him to have that same energy when it comes to stuff that our communities are demanding right now.
Queen Brown, how would you answer that question?
I think it's the same. I'm ditto with my brother. I think that what has been most disappointing, like, why the hell we fighting like this for voting rights? Like, to me, that's like a slam dunk. That's right. Right? At the end of the day, let's be clear. Joe Biden would not be in office right now had it not been for black folks. That's right. We did a Lazarus move on him. We raised his campaign from the dead. Right?
That's right. Can these bones have life?
Can these bones live again? Right? Black folk in South Carolina said, and part of it, and and it really frustrates me when I hear people black folk are the most sophisticated voters, because we literally look at voting as a tool for not about who we like. It ain't no popularity contest for us in most circumstances. It is how we gonna get a little breathing room. We knew the difference. Those of us from the Deep South, we know that when you line yourself up with a white nationalist supremacist that lines itself with that, we knew the danger of that. And so we also knew that this country, being the racist country that it is, that what white boy can beat white boy. And so many black folks that I talked to from South Carolina, your folk, right, in South Carolina were like, we ain't excited. It ain't like we excited. At the end of the day, we're going to make what we think is the best choice to get this man that we think is extremely dangerous out of office, right? And so in that context, I'm raising that because I think it's really important for us to always center that it ain't no zero-sum game. That the bottom line, black people are sitting in a midst of a structurally racist political system that we didn't create, but we are victim to. And so we have to find different access points as much as possible just to give us a little space, a little breathing room, a little resources, because it makes a difference around how black businesses are treated, how we are treated in terms of health care. So we can't ignore that. So to operate like we could just throw everything out, you ain't being strategic and you ain't got no analysis. Be quiet, because at the end of the day, if you ain't going to help get black folk power, shut up.
And that's why, do you feel like you're fighting a losing battle? Because it's 2021, and we're fighting for voting rights. Don't that seem wild?
No,
Doesn't that seem something like my grandmother and my great-grandfather would be talking to me about?
Absolutely, but let me say this. Mighty rivers are filled drop by drop. Let me say this, that whenever the push, the resistance is great, is because what we're seeing right now is not because we're losing, y'all. It's because we're winning. We're seeing this response, right? There's a backlash because we showed up. And we have to continue to show up and show out. That's what we do. Everything that we ever think about, folks on a plantation 200 years ago said, well, we ain't gonna be able to meet. Somebody was like, okay, we gonna keep on. Right. Somebody had to keep on. We have to be relentless. You gotta be relentless about your liberation. And you have to really recognize when there's a space. I always say that when there's a crack in the space, you got to get up in there. And so at the end of the day, yes, we're seeing this piece around voter suppression. We're seeing it raise its head, but not because we lost. It's because black folk, young black people, black folk who had voted for the first time, people of color, there's a new coalition of folk. Last summer, let's be reminded, that was the largest uprising ever in the history of this country that came out in the streets after George Floyd. There's change happening, but those who have been in power are actually pushing against that change, and they want us to feel like, oh, we can't do nothing. They want us to feel oppressed. They want us to be like, oh, we're gonna be able to beat them.
Let me say this real quick, because I agree with everything LaTosha said. That's the way. That's why we do this work. That's why we right. But there's a piece to what you asked that I think is really important that I don't want to miss. Right? Because you said, do you ever feel like you're fighting a losing battle? And the honest answer to that question is yes. Right? There are moments where we might feel that, right? Like you turn on the news and you hear the first thing, oh, Joe Manchin wrote an op-ed talk about, we ain't gonna vote for yada yada yada. And so we might have a moment where we feel that, but then we come back to everything that LaTosha just said, right? And the reason I want to raise that is because it's important for folks to know that it's okay to have that moment of doubt. It's okay to have that moment of frustration, right? Continuing on in resiliency isn't about we never feel that moment, right? There ain't nothing courageous about that. It's just like courage isn't not having fear. Courage is when you act in spite of the fear that you felt for that moment, right? And so, do we have a moment where we might feel that? Yeah, just like when we talk to voters and they say, what you said, Angela. Oh, it doesn't matter. People let me down. I'm not going to tell them I ain't never had no politician that let me down, right? But then we got to get to a deeper conversation. We got to fight through that. And it's important to raise that, because sometimes what happens when people feel that frustration or that doubt, then they think that they're lacking, right? They think that there's something wrong with them, and it keeps us from moving forward. But when they know that having that doubt or having that fear or having that whatever, that's a part of the process, but we work through it. We work through it. We work together, right? We lean on our faith. We lean on our history of how far we come. We lean on the actual results that we've seen. We lean on seeing a Cori Bush and those that actually get it right. When we can fight through that moment of doubt and hesitancy or fear or whatever it is, that's where the sweet spot is. That's where the magic's at.
It is very disheartening, though, when they ask us to mobilize for the White House. They ask us to mobilize for the Senate. But then when it comes to doing something like getting rid of the filibuster, so they will actually have power in the deciding vote with Vice President Harris, and they could actually get things done. And to see GOP legislators applauding Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema for not doing that, because without it, they would be dead meat. Their words, not ours. Right. It's like, come on. They look like two wings on the same bird to me.
I mean, at the end of the day, we are dealing with a system that we talk about two parties. Both of them came out of the context of it is a one-party system in many ways. There's two different frameworks, right? There's the Democrats, but we have to be able to there is a distinction. Like, there's no question, there is a distinction.
Very hard to tell now.
It's hard to tell,
Very
right?
hard to tell.
Because what we're dealing with in the midst of this is that black folk have always been a negotiating tool within this political system. We just got to acknowledge that, right? It doesn't take away that there are distinctions in the political parties. What it deals with is how racism is so is so perpetrated throughout every single system. I actually have the audacity to believe that when black folk literally operate in space of our power, that we're going to be able to transform everything around us, right? So I don't think that black liberation is contingent upon white acceptance. That's not what I believe. What I believe is if black folks got to believe that there's something different, we have to start creating something different. We actually working with a group down in Tennessee, in Chattanooga, in Tennessee, that literally are a multicultural, racial coalition that is actually working to take over the city council so that they can actually change the entire charter so that they can make it more democratic. We've got to start thinking in those kinds of ways. There are people who are actually founding, I don't know if folks know this, but 9 years after slavery, there were 90 cities that were founded by enslaved Africans. Can you imagine that? Are we creating 90 cities now? Our people are amazing. The fact that we're still existing, the fact that we are thriving in spite of all of the racism. So I'm raising that. I think it's important for us to recognize, I don't care what system they create. Like, that was a system of slavery for 200 years that folks said we ain't gonna never get out of. But there was somebody that said that we could. My point is, I think it's important for us to organize, not because we're telling people to believe, because for us, we're not telling people to believe in the system. We're telling people to believe in themselves and their own power. And out of that, literally us having this conversation around governance. Like, if we're talking about nation building, people need to know how governance works. And then what we need to create. How do we create new systems, replace these systems that have been rooted in racism that we got to call out, but we also have to think about what is that going to look different, because if not, we're going to create the same thing.
If you're talking to a couple of people, we part of a group that we actually created a third party in Alabama, in Dallas County, Alabama, right? Because we got tired of the way, at least at the state level, that the party was taking advantage of black folks throughout the Black Belt of Alabama. So we created a third party. There are times and moments where we need to do some options like that. And literally when we did it, we were building off the same laws that were in place when Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael,
name our party.
and the Freedom Party, right? And in fact, the logo,
that's right,
the logo for the Freedom Party was a image of the original Statue of Liberty in the form of a black woman, right?
Wow.
Because just like back in the day in 64, 66, when they did the Lowndes County organization, what they said is, look, our folks may not know the difference between, a rooster that was the symbol of the Democratic Party, the rooster and a donkey or whatever, but they know what a Black Panther looked like. And so they chose something as their logo that would embody what they were standing for. We did the same thing with the Freedom Party. So we had a black woman. This is before.
And she looked like a black woman. She was a sister, Annie. She was a sister, too.
This was before a lot of the talk over the past 4 or 5 years about, black girl magic and trust black women. This was 2006 that we did this, right? So we're not opposed to having a discussion around changing systems and changing party structures and having independent bodies and all that. We just got to be able to use it, like LaTosha said, strategically. Sometimes it's a geographic thing, right? Where we need to do it in particular states or something like that, and then you can build it up. But we're not opposed to. We know that there's issues with this whole democratic thing. We know that there's issues with a two-party system. And the truth is, I'll say this real quick, the truth is that there's some aspects of like some of this election reform discussion that ain't the sexy part, right? It's not the voter suppression and the early vote and the national, but there are things around campaign finance reform.
Right.
There are issues of ballot access. It's hard for a third party to even get on the ballot in most of these states, right? So there are issues like that aren't sexy issues, but they are issues. There's issue of proportional representation that Lonnie Guinier tried to have when she was nominated by Clinton back in the 90s, but he pulled that, so we couldn't even have that discussion. There are some issues about the very structure of this democracy that ain't sexy stuff to talk about, but if we're really talking about changing the nature of this, of having a radical reimagining, those are the kinds of things that we really got to be talking about.
In New York, we recently had to deal with ranked choice voting, and that was confusing for a lot of people, and then there was a lot of issues over who was going to be the Democratic nominee. What do you guys think about ranked choice voting? Is it a good thing, bad thing?
Man, it almost made me lose my support for ranked choice voting. I was like, I like ranked choice voting, but this
it
right
was so
here.
confusing.
Yeah.
Let me tell you.
I think they overthought it. Like, I don't understand why you just can't have one rank, because I actually believe in the framing of it, like literally having people to have three choices.
Break it down what it means, because I was confused. I mean, me and Charlamagne live in New Jersey now. I'm from New York, but I
had to go vote, and I was like, let me do all my research. I go and I do a like fake ballot online ahead of time, so when I go, it's nice and quick. I know who's on every ballot, so I can go and be in and out. But I was confused, and then afterward, there was all this hoopla about who won, and then how they counted the votes.
How does it work?
Yeah, well, and
is it good?
Yeah, I'm gonna break down theoretically as best I can, because the New York
I don't know.
Yeah.
But the idea
wasn't a good test run.
Right. The idea is that when you go vote, so we know that a lot of times we go vote, there's no clear winner, nobody gets 50%. Then you got to come out and you got to do a runoff election, right, which is racist in and of itself.
And
right?
It's expensive, too.
It's expensive, all that stuff, right? So part of the idea is, look, when folks go to vote, let them not just pick their first choice, but let them pick and rank like who their other choices would be. And in that way, if after that first round of looking at the votes, like there's no clear winner, then you can go to, okay, well, who were the second choice picks? And you can add that all in, and then you can knock out some folks. Then you go look at who the third choice pick and all that. So the idea is that people are listing out, in the order of preference, who they want to be in that particular seat, and then you don't have to go back and redo elections. You can just kind of go down the line, and there are different ways that can happen in different places. The New York example was just was challenging, and like you said, it was confusing for folks using it for the first time. There were mistakes made in terms of we did a test and we threw in some extra votes and all. I mean, there's a lot that was just didn't go well. And then even for candidates, I'll say this, because even for candidates, it was a little confusing, even in terms of strategy, because some candidates did a better job of others of saying, you know what, because of this rank thing, I'm gonna align myself with certain people, and then I'm gonna be able to capture those votes. The truth is, I think Maya Wiley with a different strategy could have come out on top. So there was a lot of confusion in that, but principally, you know, the idea of ranked choice voting is something that I think would be moving us forward and taking.
Hey, who won?
Racism.
I got so confused. I forgot who won. Who won?
Eric Adams.
They did?
They finally announced
Yeah.
it?
It was Eric
Yeah,
Adams?
he announced that.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. All right.
Right.
I forgot. I was
He's
like,
a
who won?
Democratic nominee.
Yeah,
Okay.
you know what it does though. I mean, the reason why, like in theory, and I think as we're talking about, you know, part of the reason why we keep these systems that actually harm us in many ways is because of convenience, and it's what we know, right? And that's why we're pushing that. We're going to have to step into the spaces. We want something different. You're going to have to stand in the space of discomfort around it as well, right? And we're going to have to give some time around the discomfort, or we'll just keep going to what we know. But the whole spirit behind even ranked choice voting is that you actually will get the person that has the most popular support.
Right.
Not necessarily because of the way that campaigns go, because there's name recognition and there's other pieces. If you got ranked money, who has the most money, most visibility. But if you're picking the top 3 folks, right, what you're going to know is across the board, you know, even if it's not their first choice, the person is their third choice, it means that there's more people, right, that actually think that this candidate, that they like this candidate. It's almost like a process of alignment instead of just total agreement.
So you could have more third choice votes, but beat the person who had first.
Basically, whoever gets the most votes in a totality gets the most popular votes. So whoever gets the most votes, right, but not just if you're able to do 3 votes. Right, what you're able to do is the person who gets the most votes, whether it's first, second, or third, all of that's going to go to the pot. And what that does is it shows you that might not be a person's first choice, but they're saying, well, I can deal with this person on the third choice. So what it means is more people actually see that candidate as a viable choice. And so some of the competition that is only one, and you know, it always has to be the one, it actually gets. It actually undermines the space of the person who has the most money, but it actually is the person, it's supposed to lead to the person who has the most spread of the vote, has the most popular support.
Question, 'cause, you know, I love the work that, you know, Black Voters Matter does, but if the George Floyd Policing Act doesn't pass, which it probably won't, if the John Lewis Voting Rights Act doesn't pass, if the For the People Act doesn't pass, and folks know that Democrats could have got rid of the filibuster, you know, to really have power to push these things through, and it was Democrats that were blocking it, how in good conscience can we tell people to go out and vote next year for the midterms?
I mean, we can't. I mean, at the end of the day, we got to be ungovernable. I mean, at the end of the day, we have got to demand that. Like we're saying, we continue to say, it's like, they're going to pay us something. Like, you don't have an option to not, right? And I think, and we're going to keep to the point where that's what civil disobedience, we've got to be ungovernable if that means. We can't go forward and say we're going to be punished because we participated, and that is okay. We're not going to sit here and have a whole country that moves on a criminal justice. We ain't going to have no criminal justice reform. That is unacceptable. They're going to have to pass something. Now, how we get it passed, and I'm saying this because people need to recognize too, because we're going to have an honest conversation, family. At the end of the day, it ain't, power concedes nothing without a demand, right? And we have to really recognize that every single major policy piece that has been passed in this country, that there's been some element of protest or push from our people to get it done. We have to be relentless until we get something, and we got to continue, and that ain't even gonna be enough. It ain't like after we get, if we get whatever we get passed, that, okay, y'all, we can rest. That's part of the process. That's part of this cycle that, okay, I'm gonna give you a little bit, and then people go back. We literally have to continue to do this work, which is why we do the work that we're doing. I also think that we have to take responsibility around how we are engaging in this in a different kind of way. That we can't just engage in this process of like, I vote and that's all I'm gonna do. Right? At the end of the day, when you're trying to get power, it's kind of like when you are let's say you're a gifted athlete. You can't just say, well, I'm gifted and I ain't gonna practice today.
Yeah.
Right? You got to practice your craft. And so I am saying that we also have to really look at this of good conscience. We can't go back and tell folks, okay, come on out and vote, and we don't get anything out the process.
Right.
We're not going to do that, right? However, not in that kind of way, because the local races, you know, we're talking about the federal races, but these local races matter.
Absolutely.
Right? And so if that means we got to go hyper local and that we just focus on local, we're going to do that. We're going to be doing the work, right? But it will determine the strategy of how we do the work going forward if we don't get something out of this process on the federal level.
Now, what about the people who are listening right now, right? And say, I love what you're doing, but hey, guys, I can't go to the front line. How can they support? How can they make sure that they are part of the movement?
Where them dollars at? Where them dollars at?
That was the setup.
That's right. Where those dollars at? I will, And I want people to recognize, even for us, a part of our work we hadn't talked about. We're doing this electoral part of the work, but a part of the work that a biggest part of our work is really about building infrastructure for Black folk. And so last year, over 600 organizations, we actually funded directly. We gave $10 million. We give half our whatever we raise, a half our budget, we give to Black people, grassroots folks. So last year, we literally wrote checks to groups on the ground in small communities that normally can't compete with resources and distributed resources to them. Black businesses, we had one of the things that we did during Christmas was a collard green caucus.
What's that?
Oh, listen, y'all. I know you know about collard green.
I know what collard greens are, but what's the collard green caucus?
I know, but I want to say on New Year's Day,
That's right.
Ham,
what you got have?
collard greens and black eyed peas.
There you go. There you go. So
Y'all don't do chitlins? Only my mama
No,
do chitlins?
man.
Well, I ain't right.
Hoppin' John.
So in the Georgia runoff, as y'all remember, again, Black folks came out, shocked the world in January, first week of January. But before that, the early voting period, the last day of early voting was New Year's Eve, right? And so we had a debate. We was like, well, what are we going to do? People ain't really trying to do nothing New Year's Eve, and we don't want to do no events and try to get people to come out and vote. But, then we said, well, wait a minute. We know folks are getting ready for New Year's Day, and what are they doing? They trying to get their black eyed peas and they collard greens. So how about we incorporate that in the outreach? So we decided to have a day where we were going to give out at polling places, or at least at neighborhood close to polling places, that we would give out bushels of collards and cans of black eyed peas, and we threw in some boxes of some cornbread to go with it, and people could come out and they could get that. And oh, by the way, you right over there by the early voting place. How about you go across the street and go and cast your vote, right? Smart. We did that in 30 counties.
No, 50.
Was it 50?
It was 50.
Was it 50 counties?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to say 50.
It was 50.
We did it in a bunch of counties throughout Georgia, simultaneous, the same day, New Year's Eve, not at night, of course, but, between 12 and 4, something like that. And folks came out, right? And they came out and they got their stuff, and it helped them to get ready for New Year's Day, and it helped them to build power. And then they also get to do what? And this is part of the answer to your question, too. We tell them, look, all we ask you to do, send this message, send this flyer to 5 of your friends. Everybody we touch, we believe, is an organizer. Everybody's got a role to play, right? They don't have to be there on the front lines. They don't have to get locked up with us when we get arrested. But they have something they could give. It might be the money, right? It might be that they're a graphic artist and that they could create, some kind of images that we can then use in the outreach. Or it might just be that they can talk to 5 people that they know. Everybody we touch is an organizer, and that's part of what we try to communicate. So yeah, that collard green caucus is an example of the different things that we in the different ways that money gets used by these local groups. We had partnerships with the Divine Nine organizations, right? It had never been done before. Partnered with them, we're giving them some grants. They got the bodies, they got the volunteers, but they were like, look, y'all, sometimes we need money to travel someplace or to get some stuff to give out or whatever. So we gave them some resources. We talking about NAACP chapters. We talking about churches. We're talking about neighborhood associations. We talking about groups that ain't even really groups, Charlamagne. And they ain't got no 501c3. They get the work done. But they get the work done. They might be the mama on the corner that could get 50 people to show up. We find a way to get them the resources to do what they do best. That's where the money that comes to us winds up going. Like LaTosha said, close to half of that money just winds up going right out the door to the groups that we work with.
How can
and
they do
and
that?
even vendors.
Tell us how yet, though. Y'all didn't tell us what website is that.
Listen, we're going to tell you the website. And I also want to say the economic piece. Y'all, the black farmers in Georgia love us because we bought all the greens in the state. So we all of this money. We bought all the collars in the state, right, from black farmers that we actually, our vendors.
In the midst of COVID, think about what they was going through.
Right, and what they were going through.
Right,
and between November to between November to December, we fed our people. Not just, we're saying the collard green caucus, but we gave out groceries to over 20,000 people. Not whether you vote or not, like literally we think that's part of the problem. When folks just come around asking for the vote and don't care about the well-being of our people, we're there. Even right now, we're doing warrant clinics. Like we're actually organizing, we're going to do warrant clinics in all of our states where we're actually helping to negotiate to get these big, some folks from 3,000 to 5,000, just a simple traffic ticket. It's now 3,000 to 5,000. Our folks don't have that kind of money. So we actually are negotiating, working with to make sure that we bring the courts to our communities and that we're actually clearing people fines out so they don't have to ride around being afraid or they can't get a job because they can't get an ID. We do that with your money. It's not just in terms of the electoral process. So you can go to our website, blackvotersmatterfund.org. You can go to our social media on Black Voters MTR. You can get Cliff Notes on Twitter and Miss LaTosha Brown on Twitter, on all the social media. We're constantly putting up the stuff that we're doing because we in these streets, y'all. We in these streets.
Right. Including next Saturday.
Make Good Trouble rally. Let's go.
Right.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk
Which,
about
by the way,
it.
is also Angela Yu Day in New York, but
Okay, all right.
28.
You got your own day, Angela. You deserve your own day. Come on, girl.
All right.
So Make Good Trouble rally. What is that?
Yeah, we coming together. We joining with a bunch of organizations, close to 100 organizations, anchor groups like Until Freedom, right? Shout out to Linda and Tamika. They putting it down. We in a state of emergency. So, partnering with organizations as we commemorate the 1963 March on Washington. We're doing a rally at the Lincoln Memorial, a rally. We're gonna have a pre-rally concert going on with like gospel and liberation and freedom songs and all that going on. And we're coming together around 10 issues that we've identified. One of which obviously is voting rights, which is important to us. But we didn't want to just do something just in the name of voting rights on this day. Because at the end of the day, the 63 March, a lot of people don't know, the name of the march was it's the March for Jobs and Freedom.
That's
right. And jobs came first. Right?
That's right.
And so it was a broader agenda than even just civil rights in a narrow sense. And so in that spirit, we're talking about voting rights, but we're also talking about reparations. We're talking about immigration reform. We're talking about police violence. We're talking about gun violence more broadly. We're talking about climate change, y'all. We're talking about all these issues because at the end of the day, voting rights isn't, we said it earlier on, it's not something that we want people to just care about just as a thing and a ritual in and of itself. It's because it's through those voting rights that we get action on all these other policies that our communities care about. So those are the kinds of things that we'll be doing in D.C. next Saturday, August 28th, starting at 10 o'clock for the concert, 12 o'clock for the rally. And y'all check us out again at those websites and the social media.
And they can sign up too. You can sign up virtually if you don't want to come out. Come on out in Georgia. We're going to have a go-go band. Come on, y'all.
You singing too, LaTosha?
You know.
You know it.
Okay.
You already know how it's going to work.
She's about to bust in the song right now.
I'm glad y'all doing this because this voting thing really confuses me because I'm like, Democrats, you do understand y'all will lose y'all power.
That's right.
Right.
If they take away our voting rights, they think they're going to win midterms.
Right.
And they win the midterms, all hell going to break loose in this country. I think that they lose the midterms, I don't think we'll ever see a Democratic president ever again.
We did a press conference last week where I delivered the message of Biden. Even if you don't do it just for the
right
issue
thing.
and the right thing itself, check this out. You lose the House in 22. Guess what they're going to do?
Impeach Biden.
Impeach on the first day.
First
you
day.
get impeached,
Especially
Joe
after
Biden.
this Afghanistan thing.
Oh, yeah. They set it up.
You about to lose your job, right?
Don't tell them nothing.
We appreciate it.
Tell your mama, don't tell them nothing. Let them learn on their own.
That's all right. They're going to learn. We're going to make sure on the 28th, we're like, you're going to learn today.
That's right.
Well, LaTosha Brown, Cliff Albright, thank you for joining us this morning. Founders of Black Voters Matter. Give them the website one more time.
At blackvotersmatterfund.org, or you can text us. Text 797979. Text
We matter.
We matter.
We matter.
Pick a side. Anything.
Text We Matter to 797979 or join us on social media, Black Voters MTR, Miss LaTosha Brown, and Cliff Notes. Come on, y'all.
It's the Breakfast Club. Good morning.
All right.
Thank you.